Hey, welcome back to Running Shoe Kings. Today I'll be giving you guys my full review of the On Cloudeclipse. We just hit 50 miles in this guy, so we're going to go into a deep dive into the shoe from one of the most polarizing brands in the sport. So first up, as a disclosure, I bought this shoe with my own money, and the following are my own opinions and anything that I found in doing my research about the shoe itself. So let's get into things. So starting off the specs on this bad boy here, we have the 40 mil of stack height right up there at the max in the heel, down to 35 in the forefoot for a 5mm drop. The shoe comes in at 9.7 ounces or 275 grams. It has a Cloudtech phase midsole here. That's that geometry there with the holes that you can kind of see through. The compound is On's helium foam, so it's one of their higher grade midsole compounds. And it also has a plate there in the bottom, which is On's speed board, although it's just a partial speed board to add a little bit of rigidity to the shoe, a little bit more stability whenever you have. All right, so we're going to cover this shoe bottom to top. So on the bottom here, we have On's outs rubber. Nothing too special about this. It does visually appear to be on the thinner side. However, I haven't noticed very much, if any, sort of wear and tear, especially with where I tend to land here on the outside of the shoe. There's very minor signs, but for getting 50 miles into this shoe, I would have expected a little bit more for how thin the rubber is. I took this out into some pretty rainy conditions here, as we have some April showers that have rolled in, and I didn't notice any grip issues whatsoever. And I'm actually pretty pleased with that, because it tends to be an issue with harder rubbers that might show less wear. Moving on to the midsole here now. So as I had mentioned, we have On's Cloudtech phase geometry with its Helion foam. It also features a speed board there on the bottom, added a little bit of stability. My only complaint with the midsole is that speed board. You could hear it clicking anytime that I stepped on a little rock or a little pebble. Never had anything that got stuck in the midsole holes or anything stuck even in this decoupled groove here at the heel of the shoe, but just something to keep in mind. Typically, you'll hear a lot of people complaining about On shoes getting squeaky, especially when wet. I had that issue with the On Cloud Surfer, but the Cloudeclipse, I actually didn't notice anything. So plus on that regards. Then moving on to the upper, we have an engineered mesh here. Interestingly enough, it almost seems to have a fly wire design, like what Nike, some of their, I think it was the Pegasus 35 had as a source of their lockdown. Um, I didn't go with the ankle lock lacing just because I wanted to see how the shoe kind of felt without it, and I actually ended up preferring not going with the ankle lock lacing. The tongue of the shoe here is very thin, not much padding at all, and that's kind of a theme for a lot of the shoe, trying to keep that under 10 ounces in the standard size. Even back here into the heel, there's a little bit of padding to help with the lockdown, but not a whole lot. You might notice there's a little bit of gray in area there in the heel counter. I took this out for its first run with some ankle weights on, so that ended up kind of dyeing that a little bit. But speaking of dyeing, that fly wire, I believe, is actually dyeing the laces in some points, which I'm not sure how I feel about that for a shoe that retails at $180. I'd think that it'd be able to handle water a little bit better, but it's just not the case. All right, so on to the ride and feel of the shoe. So a lot of On shoes tend to be more on the firm side, and a lot of people aren't liking that, especially as shoes start to more transition into the softer plush compounds that you see in a lot of max cushioning shoes today. So the first couple runs that I had in this, it I agree has a lot of firmness to it, but once I started to get a little bit more mileage into the shoe, it softened up. This was very similar to what I found with the On Cloud Surfer as well. It took less time in that shoe, given that it has a lower stack height, to open up the midsole a little bit. But once it did, just like with this shoe, I found myself wanting to go a little bit faster. Maybe that's that roll off or the Cloud Tech geometry here in the midsole that helps with that. Maybe this is just a gimmick. I'm not going to decide that for you guys. You'd have to get the shoe on and feel it for yourself. I will say I did struggle some with the upper, getting a good lockdown, but it wasn't an issue with the heel. I didn't have any heel slippage. It was just the lockdown didn't feel quite right, even whenever I did go with the ankle lock lacing. Main issue I found was these laces are just so slick that whenever I would tighten the shoe up and then go to tie it, it would kind of release it a little bit. I couldn't get that good, solid, tight lockdown like what I can on most shoes. I will also say that I've noticed some fraying in those laces. So I really think that the laces themselves are a majority of that issue and something that is easily fixed. So if you want to switch out laces, by all means, go ahead and do that. That will probably help out the shoe and the lockdown in general. All right, so moving on to my favorite part about the shoe, and that has to be the ride. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you that these Cloud Tech Phase geometry shoes, it's more of On's gimmick, but I do think that there's some science behind that, especially if you want to have a firmer foam in the midsole. Being able to limit the amount of foam that scrunches up with each step tends to put more of that power back into your stride whenever you go to toe off. I'd honestly say that once I got this shoe softened up a little bit, it started to feel a lot like the Asics Gel Nimbus 26 that I have several hundred miles into. However, I don't think it's going to last as long as that shoe does, because the Asics models, they're just built to last, especially more than the On models. And I can tell you from the experience that I had with the On Cloud Surfer with that Cloud Tech Phase geometry, that once that shoe died, it died off pretty hard. And it's a shoe that I don't really want to pick up for longer runs. This one, I still like picking up for some of those 10+ mile days. And I think that with the higher stack height, that it's going to last longer than the Cloud Surfer, but probably not as long as some other max cushion shoes that are on the market. And now on to the worst part about the shoe. So, to nobody's surprise, I think the worst part about the shoe has to be this lacing design that it has here. Like I said, it almost seems to be like the Flywire technology that Nike had in their 35, their Pegasus 35 model, but it just misses that mark because the 35 was probably one of the best Pegasus models that Nike's had in their last 10 iterations, whereas this one just isn't able to live up to that same hype. I will say that I didn't have too much scrunching in the toe box, and I find that whenever I really try and get that good lockdown, that sometimes that tends to appear in most shoes, whereas this one, it wasn't too bad in that front. But the lockdown issue with the lacing, especially whenever the laces have already started to fray a little bit from just general use, makes that a major issue that I have with the shoe for $180. So, what is my final verdict on the On Cloudeclipse? So I would recommend this shoe, maybe change out the laces, but I would recommend this shoe for somebody who's looking for a comfortable daily trainer, maybe pushing that up to a tempo pace towards half marathon. I wouldn't want to go too deep into, say, 5K or 10K paces in this shoe, but it could get the job done if you need it for like post run strides or something like that. My concern moving forward, though, is whether or not this shoe is going to have a die off like the On Cloud Surfer did. With that same Cloudtech Phase midsole, I'm hoping that it's going to have a little bit longer of a life and a little bit steadier of a decline like most other shoes do, and it's not just going to be gone like that. But again, going to have to continue getting miles into this shoe to find that out. Thank you for watching my review of the On Cloudeclipse. You guys have also gotten the opportunity to wear this shoe in your own miles. Go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm sure we have a very interesting conversation, as On tends to be a very polarizing brand in the running shoe space. But regardless, thank you for watching to the end of the video. Give me a like and a subscribe on the video, and we'll see you next time with another shoe review.